Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by showing exactly what I've been doing in my own allotment and my own kitchen garden, calling on over 30 years experience of growing my own food. Now, coming up this week, we have been spreading compost here in the kitchen garden. Down on the allotment, we've been making some final harvests of the potatoes. And back in the potting shed, I'm going to talk about heating the greenhouse. It's that time of year when everything's starting to get cold. So, without much ado, let's get into it. Well, I've got to say that the kitchen garden this weekend has been a real pleasure to work in. The sun has been shining, it's been a bit of a chill in the air, but it's been really lovely working out in the kitchen garden. I've had this huge smile on my face whenever I've been out in the garden. It really does make gardening feel good. Now, we have been concentrating on a few areas this weekend because obviously it's nearly fireworks night. In fact, my town had their fireworks on Saturday night. And what with the chickens and the dogs, I need to make sure that all our animals are secure. Now, the dog is easy. Roxy is easy because she's indoors, so we don't worry too much about her. The chickens, however, are out in their coops. So I've had to make sure that they are tucked away nice and warm and everything's safe for them so they don't feel frightened when it does go off. I've got to admit, I'm not a fan of fireworks, but when they do go off, they do scare many animals, and it's one of the things that we have to live with, but we have to protect our chickens and protect our dogs and any other animals at the same time. Luckily, they didn't seem too bothered. They were locked up nice and safe inside their coop, all huddled together and doing well. Now, the other areas that I have been concentrating on evolves around my raised beds and my veggie pot. So I've given all these areas a good tidy up this weekend, clearing away any weeds, clearing away any spent crops, harvesting a huge amount of food. We've had kale, mustard, radicchio, beetroot, radish, carrots, tomatoes, so many crops coming in still. It's been a real pleasure. Broccoli has been really impressive as well. So really happy with the harvest that we are still getting out of this kitchen garden. But what I've realised is that as spaces come available, I need, because I'm going into this polyculture mood more, where when we harvest a plant, when a space comes available, we need to fill it up with another crop. We also need to add compost. Now, obviously, I make a lot of my own compost using up my compost bins. And I've also stored up some wasted compost so that when we prick out our seedlings, the compost that the seedlings were growing in, I pot into a bucket and I use that as a mulch as well. Mixed in with some wormery compost and compost from our hop bin and other composters, it all goes in quite well to mix together and fill up all these spaces that come available. It works really well for me, I find. Now, I'm quite lucky because I don't need to buy in any compost here in the kitchen garden. I find that having several compost bins on the go, we are actually able to produce enough compost for all our needs. However, one of the things that I know many people will need to do is buy in compost. And this is something I've never really wanted to do. You can go down to the garden centre and buy bags of compost, of course, but that can work out rather expensive. But one of the other alternatives is going online or finding a local supplier and buying a bulk delivery of compost. Normally a cubic metre of compost that comes in a bag, and then you barrel it round into your beds. Now, the best compost for this is called PAS 100. It's full of all the nutrients, it's really good for the soil, but it is a bit of an expense. I don't tend to do it. I'm very lucky. I don't need to do it because I produce enough of my own compost. But if we were struggling, this may be something that we would have to do. I don't need to. don't need to. However, my veggie pods, which are my raised beds at the bottom of the garden, which are starting to come into their own again. Now, I've been growing in my veggie pods for about 6 years now, I think, quite a while. We started off with the medium, we got the small and the large, and we have really enjoyed growing with them. We're going to continue growing with them, and they really come into their own at this time of year. Now, obviously, if you don't know what a veggie pod is, it's a raised garden bed that contains all the compost and moisture in the pod. It has a net cover over the top with an integrated water system. It's really good, I've got to say. It is a really good piece of kit. But when we come to this time of year, it really comes into its own because of this cover that it has, this EnviroMesh cover that really traps in some of that heat during the day and encourages some of our plants to grow strongly. And I find that when we use this over winter, particularly for growing salad crops, but not just salad crops, radishes and other root crops, it really comes into its own. But it does need a bit of maintenance from time to time. And when I say maintenance, what I mean is that we obviously harvest any crops that we need, and like we do with the beds, is that we add fresh compost to build up the levels and build up the nutrients. Luckily, nutrients don't tend to wash out on these. They do stay in the veggie pots. But when you harvest vegetables, you are removing the nutrients at the same time. So what I tend to do is I would use a bag compost for my veggie pod, and I just fill those up when they come available, and then we sowed some more seeds into these. I sowed a series of cut and come again salad leaves that are specifically designed for the autumn winter months, some crops like our winter spinach and winter radishes in order to keep the veggie pods producing. This is going to be a great thing to use throughout the winter months, and it's the same with our beds in the garden. As the temperature gets colder and colder, we need, if we want to grow food all year round that is, we need to think about protecting our crops in one way or another. The use of cloches, the use of tunnels, particularly with EnviroMesh or fleece, are all that we need. The greenhouse is great, don't get me wrong, we do use the greenhouse, but smaller things work just as good. And cloches can be very simple to make. Just simple plastic bottle, cut the bottom off, and you've got a plastic cloche. Really simple, and it helps you grow more food. And that's really what we want. I don't want to be buying in food over winter that is imported from miles away when we can grow it ourselves. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, I imagine if you are listening to this podcast, you probably feel the same as I do. We should be growing more of our own food all year round. Well, that's what's been going on here in the kitchen garden this week, but it's now time to head on down to the allotment. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, it is that part of the podcast where I ask you if you would be good enough to leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means well to us, and it helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in learning more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, if you want to help support this podcast and keep this podcast running, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. Added to that, once a month you also receive our monthly seed pack, and in that pack you get a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month, and you get a copy of our mini newspaper. And all that is just £5 a month. Now, as an example of some of the things that we sow, over this last week we have sown some corn salad, which is perfect for sowing at this time of year, and some bourcole, a type of kale, perfect for microgreens or growing indoors as salad leaves as well. And these are just 2 of the seeds that we have sent out in this month. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in signing up to, then head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more. We'd love to have you there. Right, back to the gardening. Well, here I am down on the allotment now, and last weekend in October, that means the clocks fall back. We gained an hour in bed last night, but it also means that the evenings are going to get darker earlier. Now, this is a bit of a problem because I do like to visit the allotment on the way home from work. However, at this time of year, things are slowing down quite significantly on the allotment and, well, the kitchen garden for that matter as well. But what I've noticed, as I drove into my allotment site this morning and drove to my plot, a lot of the more experienced gardeners, people that have been here for years, they have been placing over their beds weed suppressant membrane, basically putting their allotments to bed for the winter. This is something I know a lot of people will do. They won't bother gardening throughout the winter months. Personally, I don't like that idea. I will still be down here every chance I get to do some work. I actually believe winter is the good time to do a lot of infrastructure work and really get things in place so that we can hit the ground running come spring. And of course, laying down weed suppressant membrane is definitely an option of something that we could be doing. Something that just holds back those weeds over winter and means that when we peel back the membrane in the spring, the soil is weed free, just needs a little tickle with a rake and we are ready to go. But for me, I'm not doing that where I can. There may be times when I need to use weed suppressant membrane, but for me, green manures is the answer, and green manures are really starting to kick in. You know, I've sown some green manures in the past, things like the potato green manure and Phacelia in some beds. They really have started to spring into life recently. They are really putting on plenty of growth and starting to show themselves off, which is good, which is what we want. And that is my way of putting the beds that I'm not going to be growing anything in over winter to bed. Green manures, I've spoken about them a lot, I know, but for me they are the biggest trick that I have to continue growing stuff, to continue gardening naturally on my allotment. However, other jobs than that have really been involving around tidying up where I can, keeping the weeds down in beds that are still growing food, brassicas, garlic and onions, places like that, removing the weeds, adding the mulch, cutting the grass. Those solid jobs are continuing to happen. But the main job that I have focused on this week has been digging up the last of my potatoes. I grow quite a few potatoes and we do like potatoes. So the way I've been growing my potatoes this year is I planted them in the soil in March like I always do, and as they grew we covered them over with straw. And that worked really well, I've got to say, definitely looking at the results, because the potatoes that I harvested today have been really good. Now, we've harvested potatoes throughout the year with our first earlies, our second earlies and our main crops, which is what we've been harvesting today. And the main crops have done really well. Nice, big size, really good looking potatoes. So very happy with what we've got out of those. I have left it a little bit too late to harvest them, but I think we'll be okay. I'm not too worried. Luckily, because I am on the south coast, we do get quite a late season. And as of yet, we haven't actually had a frost. In fact, I'm noticing that in certain beds, some volunteer potatoes have started germinating, which is quite easy to remove actually when they germinate like that, because we can simply pull them out and throw them in the compost bin. So that has been actually a bit of a bonus. This is the thing with the warm weather and the wet weather we have had lately, things have started to grow. Now, of course, because I use so much straw as a mulch around my potatoes, that straw is still pretty good as a mulch. And my beds where I have my perennial crops, my asparagus, my rhubarb and even my globe artichokes, those plants, particularly the rhubarb, have died down. The asparagus is still dying down, but the rhubarb particularly has died down. The globe artichokes have started to grow again, which is normal for them. But I've taken that straw and I've just placed it over those beds in order to mulch the crowns, particularly the rhubarb crowns, over winter. This should help me in the coming year. It should mean that they're going to reduce the amount of weeds that we get. As I've said, one of the great advantages of using a mulch is it reduces the amount of weeds that we get. But it also should, in theory, keep the rhubarb protected over winter should we get a hard frost. Now, it's quite unlikely I'm going to get a hard frost here. I'll be honest, we don't even get snow here. It is such a rarity because of the microclimate in my area. But there is still a chance, and my allotment is particularly open and is considerably colder than what I have in my kitchen garden. So I do want to try and protect my crowns as much as I possibly can. So just adding over this organic matter, this straw, is going to help them tenfold. Now, something else that I have done is I have moved my pots of chilies and aubergines into the greenhouse. Now, these chilies and aubergines are still producing, but I put them outside into a bed just to look after that bed a little bit while we had nothing growing in it. And they've been doing okay, still producing chilies, still producing aubergines, but I wanted to clear that bed and start sowing some green manures, so that meant that I needed to move these pots into the greenhouse. Now, the advantage, of course, is that by them being in the greenhouse, they should hopefully give them a bit more longer life, a bit more of a chance to get more food out of them. So it's a win-win. We should hopefully extend their growing conditions by putting them in the greenhouse, which means we will get more chilies and more aubergines. I'm still fascinated by the fact we're still harvesting plenty of chilies and aubergines at the moment, and tomatoes for that matter. It's absolutely amazing. It just goes to show how unseasonably warm it is currently. But what I noticed inside my greenhouse, as you know, I cleared it out a couple of weeks ago, but at the same time I had put inside my greenhouse some heads of some poppy plants that sprouted up on my allotment. I let them grow as they were because I thought they would look quite natural. They added a bit of colour, a bit of zing to the place. But I noticed that the seed heads that had been drying out in there, something had been eating them and got all the seeds. Now, this is partly my fault. I should have protected them a little bit earlier, got those seeds into a paper bag and taken them home so that they could be sown as a way of just sort of adding a bit of colour, a bit of change to the plot. And I didn't do that. So I'm left with these poppy heads that had no poppy seeds in them. So they've gone in the compost bin. A little annoyed at myself for doing that, but at the same time I suspect a bird has came along and eaten those. So I like to look on the positive side. At least they haven't been wasted. They've been eaten by a bird. Well, that kind of sums up what's been going on down on the allotment. I think as we get more and more into the autumn and winter months, we're going to have to start finding ourselves some big projects to do, which calls back to what I said a few weeks ago about writing a list and having a plan. That, I think, is what we're going to have to do soon. I've also been asked a few times about doing a video tour of my allotment on the YouTube channel, which I'm hopefully going to do in the next couple of weeks. So just hold on, if you've asked for that, it will be there. Anyway, I think it's now time to head on home, and I'll meet you back in the podding shed. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here, back with another recipe, and I'm still trying to work my way through a glut of Quince. So, this time I'm sharing a recipe for quince, cardamom and rosewater jam, a fragrant jam that will fill the house with beautiful smells while cooking and taste just as good. So let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. This recipe will make about 4 jars of jam, and you will be able to find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 1 kilogram of quince chopped into small dice, reserving the seeds as these will help colour the jam and contain pectin that you will need to set the jam. 800 grams of caster sugar, 230 millilitres of water, 8 cardamom pods and a capful of rose water. Method: add the sugar, water, cardamom pods, rose water and quince seeds to a pan and bring to a boil and boil for 5 minutes. Now add the quince and cover with a lid and reduce the heat to a gentle boil and cook for 10 minutes. Now remove the lid and turn the heat up to a medium heat and boil for 10 to 15 minutes. Now at this point you can do the wrinkle test by dropping a spoon of the mixture onto a plate that has been in the freezer, letting it cool and then pushing the jam with your finger, and if the jam wrinkles when you push your finger through it, it's ready. If not, cook for another 5 minutes and do the test again. Once ready, put into sterilised jars and enjoy. And that's it from me this week, but I will be back next month with another seasonal recipe.
Well, how good was that to hear Chef Scott's lovely voice once again, and what a lovely recipe. I've got to admit, I haven't got a quince tree. I think I said that last month, and I'm thinking that I really do need to get a quince tree after hearing these recipes. You know, Christmas is just around the corner, so perhaps we might get a present from Santa. Now, I have to admit, I do hate talking about Christmas far too early, but Christmas does bring with it images of being cold, and as I've said, it is certainly getting colder overnight. The temperature is dropping. One of the things that I've been talking about a lot lately is how I can use my greenhouse and my potting shed to protect some of my tender plants, particularly plants that I'm going to be overwintering, maybe the chilies that we're overwintering, my grapevine, my peach tree, just plants that if they're outside, they get frozen, they could end up being killed. And that's not what we want. We've invested in our trees, we've invested in our plants. We want them to survive the winter and come back and grow next spring. Often, and certainly where I am here in the south coast of the UK, it's very mild. So just putting my tender plants in a greenhouse is often all that is needed to protect them over winter. It's very simple. We just place them in there. If we do get a frost warning, we might put some fleece over the plants to add an extra layer of protection. It's as simple as that. That's all I need to protect them. I do have inside my greenhouse a large water butt that's full up with water that acts as what I call a thermal battery. Now, I work in refrigeration, so I know quite a bit about thermal dynamics. I know about how heat works. And the reason I have this water butt in there is that it is a large volume of water. It warms up during the day to the same temperature as ambient, which in a greenhouse can be warmer than outside. It warms up during the day, and that water will stay warmer for a bit longer than the air. It just may open it up that it doesn't freeze inside the greenhouse. Now, I have to admit, I've never lost any plants inside the greenhouse. It has stayed frost-free throughout every winter so far. So we're okay. These little tricks, these little methods have worked best. But if we do need to add a bit more, if we do need to warm up our greenhouse, the first thing that I think we've got to do is insulate the greenhouse or the shed to trap in some of that heat, hold in some of that heat, which just means placing bubble wrap around the glass, keeping fleece handy, things like that, that would just keep that heat where we need it. It also means if we were to heat the greenhouse, it's going to be cheaper to heat the greenhouse because that heat is less likely to escape, or it has a harder time escaping. Now, talking of heating a greenhouse, because that is something that we might look at doing this year, particularly in the potting shed, is how can I heat these while keeping it simple and ideally keeping it natural, but most importantly, we want to keep it safe. And I say keep it safe because it's not unheard of to have naked flames going on inside a greenhouse or a shed. But because it's all combustible materials, it does worry me. And then there's a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning as well. So having a naked flame does worry me. A paraffin heater, something like that, it does worry me. Now, it has been used for many years, so I could be worrying about nothing. And I did buy a little cold frame paraffin heater a few years ago. It didn't really work, in all honesty, because it just didn't cope with a large area of a greenhouse. But for a cold frame, it could have well worked. The thing is, when I used it, I had to make sure it was not going to set anything else on fire. I had to make doubly sure it was safe, which we did. We didn't get any fires or anything like that. It just struggled to keep it going overnight. It was very, very fiddly. If you've ever had a paraffin heater, you will know what I'm talking about. So paraffin heater is out. Something else that I've used in the past was actually having a compost bin inside a greenhouse. It didn't work. My idea here was that as the compost rots down, it gives us heat that we've spoken about a lot with the hot bin or just in general composting. That heat will be in the greenhouse and it will keep the greenhouse warm. It didn't work for me. It didn't work for me at all. So the idea of it being a free way to heat the greenhouse didn't work. Now, this is not something that I just thought would be a good idea. It was something that, in my mind, I had figured it would work because Victorian gardeners, they used to have pineapple houses, and these pineapple houses were basically sunken greenhouses. They had a moat going around the outside of the greenhouse in which the Victorian farmers would fill up with manure, fresh manure, with straw and hay and wood shavings, things like that, and it would heat up and keep the pineapples warm, which meant they could grow pineapples and produce pineapples. So there was a lot of logic behind having a compost bin inside the greenhouse. It just didn't work for me. So this leaves me now with electric heaters. And I think, for me, it is probably the safest way if I was to heat my potting shed. I say if I was to heat my potting shed because it's something I am likely to do. Now, greenhouse heaters are fairly cheap when they are electric, and they're easy enough to wire in. Now, for me, it's easy, but I would recommend if you are looking at getting an electric in your shed, an electric heater, get an electrician to wire it up, or at least check the work is safe. Electrical fires, again, can be quite dangerous. But for me, an electrical heater, there's no naked flames, and as long as nothing is alongside the heater that is going to cause it to burn and catch fire, it should be safe. But more importantly than that, it is going to warm up the greenhouse or warm up the shed and keep the plants safe. Now, of course, not everybody has a greenhouse. It is a luxury that I think does make a big difference, and I would always recommend that if you can get a greenhouse, have one, because it does extend the seasons. It does allow you to really grow more food. So please do, if you haven't got a greenhouse, look at the investment. Often you can pick up a greenhouse for free off Facebook Marketplace. Well, that is coming to the end of this week's podcast. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you have taken something away. If you have, then please do leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means a lot to us and it helps us get found by more people. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. Just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts and a collection of seeds every month. And that is just £5 £1 a month. Details on that on our website at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Now, on that note, while you are on our website at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, you can contact us by leaving a comment on the end of a blog post, or you can leave us a voicemail. We haven't had any voicemails for a while, but we love hearing the voicemails. And of course, you can find me on social media. Please do go give us a like and a follow on social media, whatever platform you use. Probably on there, all under the Veg Grower Podcast. Well, that is it for this week. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.